Hello there. We're back for another ClueCon Weekly. It's David Duffett here, worldwide community advocate at Signalwire, and I'm delighted this week to have Tim Panton in the ClueCon Weekly studio. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm good, David. How are you? You're surviving? I don't even know where you are, actually.
I'm in Brazil, so this is live from Brazil at the moment. And where are you, Tim?
I'm back in the UK, which it's sunny, which is like kind of deceptive, but I am actually in the UK.
Oh, well done, that man. The last I heard, you're in Berlin. So is it recently that you've made the transition back?
Well, I've always kind of been sharing my time between the two places. It seemed like better at the moment to be back in the UK, kind of nearer family and things like that, given that all the stuff that's going on. And I have a garden here, which I don't have in Berlin, and it's actually really nice to be able to get out, even if it is only 5 yards up and down the garden.
Yes, that has become the place to go, hasn't it, for Brits and probably other people under lockdown. They can get out into their gardens and wander about.
Yeah, I'm fortunate. Actually, there's a bit of woodland behind the house, so I can go out into that as well. But having a garden is a luxury I wouldn't have wanted to pass up on at the moment, I think.
That's very heartening to hear. Good stuff. Now, before we get to our discussions for today, given the uncertain times we're living in, I do just want to let people know that we are still preparing for ClueCon, the live event to go ahead in Chicago, 3rd to the 6th of August. Because things are uncertain, we've made all the tickets 100% refundable, so that if we are forced to call it off, then nobody's going to lose out at all. But we're trying to aim towards that. We're keeping our chins up and marching towards it at the moment. But we keep a healthy dose of realism and a watching brief of what's going on. So we'll see how that goes. You can get more details at cluecon.com on that very thing. Anyway, Tim, you're a seasoned ClueCon veteran. You've been to a few over the years, I believe.
Yeah, no, and it's always a great event. So, it's always good to meet the people there, and Chicago's fun as well. So, it's always been a thing I like to try and do. It's not always kind of every year by any means, but a few times certainly. And like I say, every time I've been, I've enjoyed it.
Indeed, I found the same. I started coming to ClueCon, of course, as the asterisk guy, and really enjoyed it and valued the kind of family feel that there is there. And even though my personal position has changed, ClueCon hasn't. It's still the same mix of developers hanging out with each other and enjoying Chicago, as you were just saying. Of course, Astricon is also penciled in. There's October dates for that. I don't have those to hand right this minute, but we do live in very strange times at the moment.
We do, but I mean, kind of strange in especially strange, I think, for us, and I guess for the audience as well, in that what we're doing has suddenly become super relevant for everyone. My wife is sitting next door working from home using some, I don't know what she's using, but using some remote conferencing tool for the first time. And well, not the first time, but everyone is working like that the whole time, and that is new. So our industry has suddenly become, and WebITC in particular, which I'm kind of very arguably even obsessed by, that's become a really hot topic at the moment. So it's kind of really very strange times to be in from that point of view, professionally as well as personally.
Yeah, absolutely. We're used to what we do being a kind of necessary evil that sits in the background, but it's kind of been thrown into the foreground. And things like Zoom have become, not adjectives, but
verbs, David.
That's what I was looking for. I knew my education would come in useful.
Yeah, or mine perhaps. Who knows?
Yeah,
right.
Like Googling and stuff like that. Anyway, before we get into things, Tim, I first met you at an Astricon many years ago. But that wasn't where you started. Give us a little bit of background, please, on the Panton career and what's led you to be sitting here today in the ClueCon studio.
Gosh,
in the ClueCon Weekly studio.
So I weirdly, it's a series of accidents. Long story, very short. It's always a series of accidents. I don't plan any of this. It just kind of things happen to me, and they look interesting, and I go and do them. This all started basically with I was doing a security app for. I don't think I'm allowed to say who they were, but anyway, a London financial organization. And it was to allow their engineers to log into servers that were typically in banks and other financial institutions. And they wanted a remote login. Well, no, it was a remote password. So you could allocate an engineer a temporary password, but they wanted to allocate it in a way that wasn't dependent on the network, because quite often the engineers were going in to fix the network. So they wanted something that you could dial into, prove that you were the right engineer, and it would read you back a password that would be applicable for the server you were sitting in front of. And they talked about doing this in a kind of manual way with a receptionist or whatever, or handing out bits of paper before they left and whatever. And they said, well, we could do this with computer-aided telephony, which dates it. I think this was where are we? Be 98 or 9 in the run-up for the year 2000 anyway. Yeah. So I was building web apps at the time, and I was just like, well, this would be fun, playing with telephony. And I bought a Dialogic card, which I think is actually where we met. I think I went to a Dialogic course that you gave, or that may be wrong. But anyway, so I bought this Dialogic card, which cost the same as my car, and it would carry 32 channels of audio. And it literally, I think it costs like £4,000. And I remember holding it very carefully, because I thought, if I zap this for static, that's like my earnings for the month gone. And anyway, so we built this app, sort of coming in from the security side, but actually building this app that read people's passwords to them. And I got hooked. And I spent the next 10 years not doing security, but doing voice over IP, or in fact, probably a bit more than 10. And then I got a little bored with that, and various things happened, and I ended up doing IoT stuff. But in the middle of all that, I got completely hooked on WebRTC. And that's, I think, the kind of the theme of it is actually the crossover between real-time communications and browsers. I think browsers are kind of a uniquely fluid deployment method, and real-time communications is just so valuable for everyone. We all kind of want to talk and want to see each other, and so kind of combining those two has been ended up completely accidentally being the main themes of what I'm doing, with a sub-theme of being keen on doing it in a secure way, which a lot of people don't bother with.
Well, and also, Tim, I would say in a very innovative way. I don't think you're the person to kind of take the status quo. You're generally moving things on a little bit when you get involved in things.
Yeah, I learned early on that there's 2 ways to make money as a small business. You either have to be dealing with the established kind of or post-established stuff, like things that have been around forever, and you just get to be a really good carpenter or gardener or whatever, and that's one way to make sensible money, and then or COBOL programmer. And then the other end of it is to be at the leading edge. There's very little money in the middle, because you're competing with the big organizations. I'm constantly trying to stay out of the way of competing with the telcos or people like Cisco, because there's simply no point. They'll just roll you over. So you have to be either at the leading edge or the other end. And yeah. I happen to enjoy being at the leading edge. It's scary, but fun.
Yeah, good. An interesting, valuable point. Just for the sake of historical veracity, I should just say that I've never worked for Dialogic. I did work for Aculab, the UK equivalent that did telephony cards, and I spent several happy years there. And of course, I came across Dialogic because they were an arch competitor at the time. And it's funny in a way, because over those years, I remember Kevin Fleming at Digium when I showed him an Acculab card saying, what did you guys do? Just pick the most expensive every single component you could find and throw it all onto a card, because the Acculab cards, in common with the Dialogic cards, had a lot of very, very serious circuitry on and were very, very expensive. But strangely...
So I must have been to an Acculab training course in that case.
Maybe so.
I'm sure I met you in the context of like P1 cards, E1 cards.
Yeah, it's possible. What I was just going to mention is that, of course, when Asterisk came along and showed the world that everything could be done on the host in terms of all the stuff that people are doing on custom DSP chips, that it was a massive game changer. But as things evolved, we found the very same people that wanted to do everything on the host then saying, actually, there are certain things that might be better done on some DSPs. So we'd like to send you a DSP card to do echo cancellation or transcoding between G729 and whatever. But anyway, very, very interesting times. And the things that stand out most when I think Tim Panton are exciting Astricon and ClueCon talks. And I would also credit you with being part of, or creating part of the background to James Bodie's now world famous Dangerous Demos. And I think of you and Ben Klang. You provided the danger insofar that the demos were so many stages kind of cobbled together. I don't say that in a bad way. Putting things together, but the danger was they weren't going to work. And Ben Klang with the element of physical danger that he might have a missile launcher or a drone under the control of Asterisk. But I think the two of you really created that background in which James Bodie was able to latch on to a dangerous demo.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I've always found that them a nice way of getting a point across, and for me, it's very self-indulgent, but I find that building these things helps me clarify, what it is that works and what it is that doesn't work, and learns. I quite often use them as a way of learning a new space. So, if I've got it's a deadline, and it's a weird sort of discipline in the sense that you're trying to build something that gets a point over, but you're also trying to kind of experiment with stuff that maybe you don't really know how it works, and so you're learning in building this thing, and that's always it's kind of, I don't quite know where I got it from, but I always enjoy doing that. It's always fun. The most recent one that actually isn't a demo, but the most recent example of that sort of thing that I've been doing is building self-driving vehicles as a hobby, which is just amazing. If you think VoIP is difficult to get working, you try building a self-driving car. There's just so much to go wrong.
Yeah, I was about to mention, Tim, that the last time our paths crossed were at was at ComCon last year, but the year previous to that, I'd also met you at ComCon, where you did a tutorial on self-driving vehicles. Do you remember we built some little...
Right. But the thing with those was that you were in control. And what's fun about the evolution since then, actually on the same physical platform, I wonder if I've got one. Yes. My desk is a mess, but one of these. So what you've got there is two wheels with motors, a Raspberry Pi and a driver and a camera. And I had fun, like a bunch of VoIP engineers basically built these things, which was fun. And then drove them around by remote control over WebITC, which is it was a lot of fun. And, I think everybody learned something. I'm not quite sure what, but something. But the next stage on from that is to take that platform and teach it to drive itself. So you just let it loose on a track and let it drive. And that's been, I wanted to find out what, this whole AI thing was about. And so I took that board and actually I replaced, I've got a speaker on this, which is not part of the game, but replaced the Raspberry Pi with one of these, which is a Google Coral board, which has got pretty much the same pin out and physical layout, so it's a kind of almost a one-for-one replacement.
Right.
But the thing this will do is it will take the video from the camera and it will do an AI recognition task on that, every frame of that video, and it'll do 20 frames a second. So you can do 20 frames a second of recognition on it, and you can do things as simple as like, where is the center white line of the road? And it will tell you. It won't always get it right, but it will tell you. And so you can then use that as input to the steering. So I had this amazing to do. I mean, it took me much longer than it should have done, and I should have been working, but no, really interesting stuff, and quite kind of remarkable that instead of having to do that on a server, like, you think of that as being a kind of big AWS machine doing this, or a server somewhere, but actually that's $100 and something of stuff from, where did I buy it from? Farnell or somebody, one of the component suppliers, and they just ship it to you. That's like incredible stuff.
Amazing. At the last ClueCon, we also had a self-driving car sort of hackathon. Now, I'm not sure it was AI. I think it was more, if it butts into something, back off and turn round or whatever.
Right.
But a course was constructed, and at the end, people submitted their vehicles into the beginning of the course to see if it could get around all the bends and twists and get out the other end. And I think out of a field of 8 or 10, one got right to the other end without falling by the wayside. Lots of fun to watch. It was Shane that looked after that. Anyway, great stuff, Tim. But what would you like to talk about today?
Well, so not AI, actually. I mean, I think what the background of kind of WebRTC and whatever is kind of resurfaced now. And I was spending my time securing IoT devices, like the robot, or more realistically, like one of these, which is a baby monitor. You want those things to be secure, but you want them to be usable from your smartphone. And so WebRTC is kind of a nice platform to run in those. So that's what Pipe's been doing. But in the last, 5 weeks, we've realized that actually life has changed, at least temporarily, and it's not reasonable to expect people to be building new hardware at the moment and shipping it all around the world, because transportation isn't what it used to be, and a lot of the factories are shut down and whatever. So we figured that it was a good moment maybe to use our skills for something else, and not that we won't carry on doing the IoT stuff, but slightly on the back burner for the moment, and see whether we could do anything in the more in the social space. So I've got a bunch of slides, but feel free to interrupt and critique. And I don't want to turn this into a pitch. I just happen to have a pitch deck, but it really isn't. It's just they're just words.
And it's to hear from you, Tim, on that.
So now, do I need to do something, or have you already got it?
I've got you into screen share mode, but at the moment I'm only seeing a black screen. Your first slide is there. Yeah, so away, and I will sit here on the side and ask questions if
yeah, I'm just wondering what happens if I do that. Do you still have it? Yes. Okay, because I want to be able to change slides on it. Right. So I mean, basically, we all know this, but it's kind of worth stating that a lot of stuff that we used to do physically, going to clubs, meeting up with people, are things that we have to do online if we want to keep those relationships going. And it's not just business. And my belief, unfortunately, is that that's going to be the way of life for 12 to 18 months, possibly longer. So, and everyone's doing Zoom at the moment, or FaceTime or WhatsApp or tools like that. And they're fine for business meetings, and Zoom and Hangouts were built for business meetings of various levels of formality, but they were built to do business with. And Skype to a lesser extent, but also kind of the whole syntax of Skype is got a particular behaviors around it. So, you kind of building an app like that, as we all have, this is the sort of mental picture you have of how people are, of the situation you're trying to replicate or produce. Yeah. But that's not a social situation. Like, that isn't what my dinner parties look like. And so what we find is that the kind of these group conferencing tools just don't work in a more social space where you're not doing business. Like, the privacy conditions are different. Like, in a business meeting, the first thing you do is all hand around business cards. So everyone has everyone else's email address and phone numbers. If this is pick a random example, a group therapy session, that doesn't happen. You don't hand out your personal details to everyone else in a group therapy session. Right? But things like Zoom assume that you will. And so, they're just not built around the social semantics of the space that they're being used in. And it's great that they exist, but there's
just to jump in for a minute, Tim. Zoom, of course, has also not only come to popular use, but also more recently come to popular criticism over things like privacy and security.
I think so. I mean, there's a complex thing there. I think to an extent, that's unfair in that for most of the things that they've been hauled up on, the decisions they made were appropriate for a business meeting. The level of encryption, the level of privacy, the level of security is sort of what you expect if you're having a multi-party business meeting. Like, if you go and have a meeting in the conference room in a hotel, there's a certain level of privacy you're expecting. But you've all checked in at the front desk. You've all been given name badges. And you're not, unless you sweep it for bugs, you don't know whether anyone else is listening. You're probably on the hotel's camera. So actually, the Zoom made that set of assumptions, but then those don't translate for schools. Like, if you're suddenly, if this is a bunch of 12-year-olds, then their privacy requirements are quite different from executives going to business meeting.
I was thinking more though of this business of them passing details off to Facebook and stuff like that has been reported. Of course, I don't know whether that's true or not, but having seen some of the reports that they're siphoning off data and things like that, and also the experience that people have had with unwanted parties jumping in and playing in videos and things to
right. And I think a lot of this is, there are some design flaws in there, some intrinsic design flaws in there, but I think a lot of it is really just about the fact that they designed it for a use case which was mimicking a conference room. And that's not what people are doing with it. And so all of those expectations and corners they've cut that may have been arguably appropriate, like logging in with Facebook, okay, it gets you in quicker. That was, and the main criticism of a lot of these conference systems is it's a pain in the neck to get into them. So you sort of understand the trade-offs they made. And I think some of them were just wrong even in that context. But I don't think Facebook has a role in business meetings, but that's personal opinion. But I can see how they got to where they got to. The big mistake was, and it's arguably not even a mistake, was to say, yeah, everyone can use this. Schools can use it. Mental health charities can use it. Anyone can use it, without caveating that, bear in mind, that's not what we designed it for.
Right.
So, I'm kind of slightly torn. I do think they made some fairly serious errors as well. But I'm not as kind of negative about them as some people are. I see how they got to it. And this is the summary. It's like, I don't believe that one size fits all. And that's what we're forcing Zoom into doing things that it wasn't built to do. So what we're doing, and this is a working title, I think we'll end up changing it, is we've decided that, think about something like WordPress. WordPress is a way of building a series of quite niche micro-targeted sites, and that's basically what we're thinking of doing. So we build a set of real-time communication tools around a specific use case with social semantics for that example, for that thing. So like I had a really funny conversation about yoga classes. So if you're a yoga instructor, you want all of the class members to be able to see and hear you, and you probably don't want them to be able to hear and see each other. So it's much more of a broadcast medium, except when you want to see the one that you've selected to see, and you want to be able to maybe have a one-to-one conversation with them about what they're doing right and wrong.
Right.
But it's not like the social etiquette of that is completely different from that of a business meeting, which is kind of really interesting. So we had these kind of diagrams put together so you could see, kind of visualize that distinction. It's kind of it was a bit of a revelation for me, that. And then so you look at that and things like other examples might be things like virtual play dates. Virtual play dates are really interesting for kids where, okay, the children want to interact, but actually the parents want to have a watching brief. They want to have set the thing up. They want to control who's in it. And they probably want to keep half an ear on it so that it doesn't get out of control without necessarily being in the room, ideally. So that is an interesting dynamic of that. And the same's true for things like co-watching TV, virtual dinner parties, coffee with a friend. The way that you set those things up, the way that the media is routed essentially is different for each of those cases. And the way that you use screen real estate is different for all of those cases. So the idea is to kind of do that and do that for each of those use cases. And in order to make it affordable, we want to take it as much of the cloud dependencies out as possible and make it app free. So we want to do this in the browser. And that I think is the thing that is really momentous at the moment, which is that almost everyone has a smartphone that's capable of running WebRTC in the browser as it's shipped. Like there are 2.5 billion smartphones out there that can run WebRTC right now. So that's a 2.5 billion target for these things that they can just roll out immediately to anyone who wants them. And if we can lighten up as much on the cloud as possible, then that will be scalable and privacy sensitive. And we're a European and we're a German company, actually, Pipe. So kind of we need to follow the European ethos of security by design, data privacy, end-to-end encryption, all of those things. And we made the decision we don't want to advertising fund it because that just complicates things. But as I say, you can deploy to all of them, all of the smartphones out there instantly, which is really cute. And the funny thing is we came up with all of this and then we realized that actually we'd done it. We'd already done this a couple of times. So if you think about the baby monitor I waved earlier, it is essentially, it's a WebRTC session, but with kind of changed rules, right? In that the baby doesn't see you, but you see the baby. You control whether the baby can hear you or not. And there's some side channel stuff about whether this particular one does some recognition of whether the baby's moving and its breathing rate. Right. But so we've kind of built a narrow cast WebRTC app already. I just hadn't thought of it like that. And the other thing we built is this thing that I do a podcast. I don't know if you know this. I do a podcast looking at what the future might look like, which we got hopelessly wrong about, like almost everything as far as the virus is concerned. But but by interviewing people, and we wanted to interview people remotely. So I built a WebRTC tool. I just send them a link, they open it on their smartphone, and I can then conduct an interview with them, like with no install, no hassle. They don't have to log into anything. It's just, and it doesn't really matter how the link gets them. I can SMS it to them if I want.
Right.
So and that in the end, if you look at it, that's another one of these tools. It's just another WebRTC tool with a very narrow set of use cases that's like perfectly aligned with that use case. So yeah, I mean, this is the story about that. And it does the recording as well. So, I mean, the important thing about this is not only is it high quality audio, but it does a recording as well. So the idea is that I reckon we can churn out one of these every 4 weeks. We can just kind of dinner party, wine tasting, kids play, yoga. Like you can churn these out every few weeks, because once you've got the framework in place to do this, it's just another one of understanding the rules and pumping out the next one. Finding basically you have to find a subject matter expert who will tell you what it is that you want in that situation, and then we go off and build it. And that's the kind of the vision of what we're going to do for the next few months, because these things are sorely needed and they're not that expensive to produce, and it surely must be possible to kind of make a little bit of money on them somehow. And so that's the thesis, and that's what I'm doing. Does any of that make any sort of sense?
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. As you were speaking, I was just thinking, I'll just, do you need the presentation further? Or
no, I think I'm done there. Yeah.
Okay, I'll pop us back to the two-headed video here. As you were going through that, I was just thinking, actually,
I haven't got you back yet, David.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
No. Oh, is there something I need to do? I can turn screen share off if that helps. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, let me just pop us back.
Sorry, I've misaligned us again. There we go. Right.
Not the way. Yeah, I was just thinking as you were going through that it's a genuine example of thought leadership, which is what I'm used to from you, Tim, because you've moved away really from thinking about the technology to actually having thoughts, around its users. And sadly, a lot of the time, the thoughts that other people have only extend to what does the user interface look like. But you're thinking much more broadly than that about what the people want, rather than just where they'll click the buttons or how they'll set the screen up.
I think all of that is like, you need to do all of those things. Like you can't, there's no point in trying to like design the perfect thing when the technology isn't out there. There's no point in building something like this if the screen layout is so confusing nobody can use it. So it's like you need all of those skills. And I'm very much aware that my design skills are terrible. So I always need somebody else to do the graphic design and to do the functional design, because that's not a skill I have. But I think what excites me is understanding how we can meet those needs with technology that's already out there. Like that's the really fantastically exciting thing, is how much you can do in the browser that's already out there, already shipped to 2.5 billion people. And that's like, I built a thing the other day, which is, I was teasing Josh Culp, and he's ignored me actually, because it must have been a hit. Therefore, but I was teasing Josh Culp about the idea that what I've built. His what was it called? Conf Fridge.
Conf, that's right.
Right, that thing that where you could mix channels from n minus from all of the channels that come into a mix in Asterisk, and same thing in FreeSwitch. I've forgotten what it's called in FreeSwitch. Chan Conf or something. Anyway, whatever. But so
I know what you mean.
Same thing. The funny thing is, you can build that in the browser. I've now built a 9-way conference engine in the browser. And the really funny thing is, it sounds better. Because you can do it in positional stereo. So I have like your 9 people spread out over a stereo space, and you can hear them.
And this is with Opus, is it, Tim, for the stereo audio?
Yeah.
Right. Very, very clever stuff.
But the fact that I can do that in a browser, so there's like, I don't have to produce any server resources for this to work. Like I need a website, and that's pretty much it. Like all of the heavy computing power is provided by the users, which is kind of a bit like the Skype model used to be. I don't know if you remember this with Skype, that if you started the multi-way call, you had to do it with the person who had the most bandwidth, and the heaviest computer had to be the one who started it, because they did the mixing. And we're back to that, really.
Yeah, I remember that concept of the supernode and things. Very, very interesting stuff. And having the browser as the client is the next best thing to being clientless, because, like you said, everybody's got the browser there. It's a ubiquitous thing. There's no need to go and get anything or install anything. It's just ready to go.
The other thing that has changed, and I keep on going on about this, and everyone kind of looks at me as if I'm mad, but the microphones in particular, but the microphones in even like this is what, a 4-year-old tablet. The microphone in this is good. It's not brilliant, but it's better than any of the microphones that we were using in headsets 5 years ago. You know, and if you get a modern iPad, the echo canceller in the modern iPad is just perfect. Like it's better than the ones on a Polycom conference phone. Like it's just immaculate, that thing. And so, and that's just sitting there, and everyone's got them.
And coupled with the increase and improvement in bandwidth,
right?
We've got connectivity for in general.
Yeah. No, that's true. I should like the fact that you can assume that even on 4G you're going to get, half a megabit fairly solidly. It is amazing. Like, and then that's uplink. Yes, we forget how much of a change that is from the old days when getting 64 kilobit felt like a luxury.
That's right. The good old days where Microsoft NetMeeting could get video and audio down a 28.8K modem link.
Yeah, if you were satisfied with a postage stamp.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Tim, it's been great chatting. Where can people keep up with these developments? Is there any of this stuff on the Pipe website?
Not really. Your best bet is to go to GitHub/Pipe. We're putting all of this out as open source. It's all on GitHub/Pipe. And if one of the projects on there takes your fancy, then have a look, run it, submit bugs, changes, pull requests, everything. We want as many people to join into that as possible. And I'm not ruling out the idea that some of the things that we want to do will need servers, will need SMSs sent, will need some of the things that SignalWire does. That makes perfect sense to integrate where we need it. But I want to keep that to the absolute minimum to keep the costs down and the deployment as easy as possible.
Indeed, and that's where we're at a SignalWire, if you like. It's just providing services where they make sense for people to use. If they want to, of course, they can build all their own things on FreeSwitch as well. We've got both for people to use. Now, you also mentioned your podcast, Tim. Where can people find that?
So that's Distributed Future. It's on iTunes and pretty much all of the podcast hosting things. We actually do have a website as well, which if you, for one reason or other, don't like the podcasting hosts, it's on Distributed Future, but the RE is .re, which I think is an island in the Pacific somewhere, Reunion? I don't know. Anyway, Distributed Future with the RE after the dot. So.
Great. Okay. And what a great name to have, because one of the things that's come out recently, I believe, is the semantic difference between saying you're working remotely or you're part of a distributed team. They could be interchangeable, but yeah, I like the word distributed.
We actually, on that note, one of the podcast interviews, which we did very cleverly 18 months ago, was with Sarah O'Donnell from GitLab, and they are 100% remote. They have no physical offices, and so that all of their employees are remote. And we did a really nice interview with her about how that works, how to do it, and how GitLab do it. And what was fascinating was the extent to which they rely on documentation and writing of specifications and plans and that sort of stuff, and less on person-to-person video calls. Like, that's part of it, but in the end, the decision isn't made in the video call. It's made, in their case, in the issues log. So I thought it was a fascinating observation. But so if anyone wants to listen to that podcast is out there.
Great, good stuff. Yes, I also heard another podcast, and I forget the name of it now, but it was about remote working from home, distributed working. And the guy who did that also ran an organization which was 100% distributed. And he said that in their interview process for getting new people on board, they virtually never talk to them face to face, but they place great emphasis on their writing skills, because he said when you're working asynchronously, in other words, people don't have to be there together. You know, somebody could be working at midnight while somebody else is working at 7 in the morning or whatever. It is the writing skills that come to the fore in terms of that asynchronous communication.
Absolutely. And I think as the team gets to know each other, that gets easier. I mean, we did just as a final little story, we did, when I was working for Jason Gecky and Jose de Castro at Troppo and Voxeo, we did a project for AT&T, as it turned out, where they wanted to do a live, one of the very early live calls on from WebRTC to the PSTN, and we were building, basically on the fly, building a server that was capable of doing that bridging. And we had teams. We had 3 teams. We had a team in Beijing. We had a team in Europe, and a team in the US, which was actually also distributed between Orlando and California. And so we did that development over the period of 2 weeks, basically never stopping, because every 8 hours, one of the other teams would pick up. And so we went round the world iterating on that code over a couple of weeks. And we got it working, and we got it done. That was probably the most kind of amazingly fast development ever that I've ever been part of. It's just like, because you get up in the morning and you'd find that Beijing had like solved that problem. And then you'd pass the problem on in the evening to California, and they would pass it on to Beijing, and you'd come back and everybody else had solved your problems, or more likely they'd left you with a kind of, Tim will deal with this. But it was absolutely amazingly productive piece of work. So cool.
Yeah, great stuff. And that ability that you were perhaps pioneering then, the PSTN to WebRTC, is of course happening regularly now on a much smaller basis, if you like, where one of the things that people are also using in addition to Zoom is Jitsi. There's a lot of Jitsi use out there, and at the same time as Jitsi use, there's Asterisk and FreeSwitch use in terms of connecting up for PSTN dial-in for those that, for whatever reason, can't jump onto a video call. Fascinating stuff, Tim. How long ago was that with Troppo and Voxeo?
More than 10 years. I'm not absolutely certain. I'd have to look to see what the date was on that development, but it was about 10 years ago.
Great stuff. Well, Tim, thanks very much for taking time out to come and talk to us about what's going on. Interesting as always, and a pleasure to talk to you.
No, great to talk to you, David.
All the best, and we'll see you next time, whether that's at a physical ClueCon or at another ClueCon Weekly or elsewhere around the place.
Yeah, sounds great.
Take care.